Hello, everyone. We want to thank you for joining our webinar, The Business Case for Medicare for All. This is Marvin from ASBC speaking, and we're going to turn things over to our CEO, David Levine. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you on. And clearly, right now, as healthcare is getting debated fast and furiously at the national level and also at many state levels, we had thought it important to step up and to try and offer a different business perspective on healthcare. And as a part of ASBC's work of lifting up the voice and engaging business leaders to have a power that's a more values-based, a sustainable, a responsible, a just perspective on a wide range of issues. Likewise, we have been stepping up further and deeper into the healthcare debate.
Mom, is it okay if I get up to here?
A little bit lower. Just need to have folks muted in the background at the moment as we proceed, if you're not speaking. So, as a part of this work, we've now formed a new initiative, Business Leaders Transforming Healthcare, whose mission it will be to work to transform the healthcare system, to ensure that we have a transparent, evidence-based, that prices are a function of value, and our goal is to engage as many businesses as possible to enable the transformation of the healthcare system and to get to those policies that are consistent with these basic principles that we've developed, right? So our key principles are: one, transparency. Everything about the system, all data, cost, political influence must be out in the open. Evidence-based, that all decisions must be data-driven and evidence-based. Value, right? That services and drugs are priced as a function of measurable value. And lean production, that all processes involved in the financing and delivery of the care must be lean, follow lean production techniques. In other words, not wasteful, not sticking in all the middle people, the administrative cost and complexity that's adding so much to the cost of healthcare. And 2, 3, and now 5 is, to the full extent possible, the system must foster true competition in the marketplace for goods and services. So for those of you that know ASBC, these are principles consistent with so many of the other issues that we take on, but particularly need and are important for tackling the healthcare industry, for tackling these key issues and the like. So today, we're very pleased to have on the phone Richard Master, the president of MCS Industries, the largest picture frame manufacturer in the United States, a member of ASBC. And Richard is also a key driver and a key principal and a founder of our Business Leaders Transforming Healthcare campaign. Right? So in a minute, I'll turn it over to Richard. And then Richard will be introducing and turning it over to Jerry Friedman, really a renowned economist that we're fortunate to have join us today. But the other thing that I'd like to mention, that as a part of this work, we've also been very active in working with and supporting and working alongside leaders in states across the country that likewise are looking to drive on healthcare. And you can find on the ASBC website and Business Leaders Transforming Healthcare site, which will provide that information in the slides and later. You'll find the access to the state-based campaigns, but we want to in particular call out California and Oregon and the key work that they're doing there. But there's also work going on in New York State, the beginnings of work in Massachusetts, and we look forward to working with other business leaders in other states in order to advance similar healthcare campaigns that look for the transformation of the healthcare system. So with that said, what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Richard Master, and who'll take you through some of the business case around the issue. Richard?
Very good. Thank you, David. This is Richard Master. I'm speaking to you from our MCS headquarters in Easton, Pennsylvania. I'm the executive producer in addition to, founding our company and being in the administrative part of our company. We're a value-based company, and we've produced 2 documentaries on the healthcare system. One is Fix It, Healthcare at the Tipping Point, and the second is Big Pharma Market Failure. You can access these movies on the internet by going to Fixit, F-I-X-I-T, healthcare.com, one word. And in the interest of time, since there is a lot of material to cover, let's launch into a set of slides that we've compiled, and then we'll get to Jerry. I want to try to take about 10 minutes. The first slide is Fix It, Healthcare at the Tipping Point, which is the title of our first movie, and advocates a single-payer solution to the healthcare crisis that we're engaged in. The next slide is relates, and I'll the comments by a very renowned and respected set of business people, Warren Buffett, head of Berkshire Hathaway, and his vice chairman, Charlie Munger, in which they consider the healthcare system a tapeworm in the belly of the American economy, impacting our international competitiveness. And Charlie Munger, who's a Republican, by the way, and is hopeful that he lives to see the day he's in his 90s, but a very profound guy, says that a single-payer system with no insurance aspect is the way to go. And he says, as for a Republican, that's saying a lot. Let's go to the next slide. And this is an indication of what the true cost is for a family that's employed in the United States and covered under an employer-sponsored plan. In 2002, it was approximately 9,000. 2014, 23,000. We're up above 25,000 right now. Really astounding, particularly when you see that the median income for a worker in the United States, median compensation is 30,000 or less. So we've really priced healthcare out of the reach of a substantial portion of the population. Next slide is an indication, a more macro level indication of that healthcare cost is running away from us. We're now at $3.3 trillion. We're an $18 trillion economy. Jerry will correct me if I've got these numbers wrong. But we're really headed pretty quickly to a $4 trillion healthcare bill for the society. And then in the middle of somewhere in the 2020s, we're going to be at $5 trillion. The issue really is that these cost increases, next slide please, are unsustainable. Healthcare cost is growing faster than the consumer price index is growing, faster than the growth in economic output, GDP. So it is a situation where the healthcare system is eating the rest of the economy alive. Next slide is a per capita healthcare cost comparative to other countries. This indicates that we're at $8,700 in the United States. We're really now above $10,000. Nothing to celebrate when the average of the economic developed countries is less than half of that. And here's really what Warren Buffett was talking about in the next slide. Healthcare as a percent of economic output. We're he is saying 17%. The numbers are more like 18%, and he recollects when we were at 7%, and we were roughly in the 1970s equivalent to the expenditure for healthcare in other industrialized countries, Canada, etc. Canada moves into a single-payer format. We rise to 18%. Canada is approximately 11%, as you see by these numbers. As a percent of federal budget, and this is what's perplexing our Congress, healthcare is above 25% of the federal budget, certainly above national defense. Now, 15 years ago, national defense was substantially higher than our expenditures on healthcare. So healthcare growth is extraordinary. The next slide indicates household bankruptcies. 600,000 families out of 1.4 million Americans per year affected by bankruptcy. 62% of those families are bankrupt because of medical bills, and the majority of those folks are covered with probably with our high deductible policies. Okay, so we're looking now at the next slide, and that shows Taiwan at 1.6% of overall dollars of cost, 1.6% associated with administrative expense. We use Taiwan because it's the last country that has transitioned to a single-payer country, and with really great success. And we've studied Taiwan in particular. And that is compared to the United States, where 30 to 35%, approximately 15 to 20% in the financing side is associated with administrative overhead and profit. And then particularly, I should isolate, it really describes the private commercial insurance, which is about a little over $1 trillion of the financing of the healthcare system in the United States. On the delivery side, these are hospitals, professionals. We're seeing about 24% of revenue associated with administrative cost, and there have been comparative studies which show about 14% in most other countries is the appropriate number. Most other countries, we're the only country, really the only modern industrialized country that hasn't adopted a single-payer system in one form or the other, probably except for Switzerland. Switzerland is still wrestling with the issue. Okay, next slide shows really how Medicare is a much more efficient utilizer of dollars going into the system. So these are 90. You give Medicare $1, and you get 97 cents out to providers of care. And you give a commercial insurance company, Aetna, Cigna, etc., you give them $1, and somewhere approximately 80 cents is going back out to providers. Let's review very quickly what single payer is, and simply, a public agency organizes all healthcare financing. The delivery of care remains private. So this is not socialized medicine. Similar to, it's not England, it's more like Canada. All Americans could be covered. Patients would regain choice of doctors, hospital, and then the doctors themselves who have been collectivized under our current system as a result of the competition between insurance companies and the extraordinary expense associated with the administrative cost that individual doctors really can't afford to do. doctors would regain autonomy. Under single payer, we could have a rebirth of private practitioners. So let's move on to the economic consequences of single payer reform. And I think I'll just summarize this because I think Jerry's going to cover a lot of it. We've worked on analyzing, each of these categories of cost, hospital care, professional services, and what we see. This is the 2016. This is actually a forecast of 16 expenditures. We see a substantial reduction under single payer as a result of a reduction in administrative expense, which should be realized in lower cost to consumers or to the entity that will finance the system, and also lower cost as we establish a more unified fee schedule. I can just reflect on one statistic in Pennsylvania. I'm here in Pennsylvania. Medicare costs for a day in the hospital are about half of what the reimbursements are from commercial insurance. And there is no difference really in quality of care associated between the two ways of financing. Going down to the another key factor here is drugs and medical devices. We would assume under a single payer system that Medicare Part D would be permitted to establish a national formulary and negotiate prices of drugs. Currently they do not. That would result in substantial savings. And then here's a real big one, $200 billion associated with the administrative costs of private insurance, and we're going to be substituting that with government administration, so that $200 million would really translate into about an $8 to $10 billion increase in government cost. Overall, the potential is upwards of $700 billion in savings. If we added back the cost of universal coverage, meaning all citizens would be covered, and the increased utilization and reduction in out-of-pocket expense, we could have a net savings of somewhere around $400 to $500 billion. And it may be $300 billion, but $300 billion is an extraordinary sum of money, and it is a whole lot more than the Republicans are forecasting in savings under their plans, with a lot of hurt and dissatisfaction throughout the country. Why can't we get this done? Next slide. Well, 60% of Americans would want to expand Medicare to provide coverage to every American. So what is the question? Next slide is really the big challenge is money in politics, and you'll see from watching our second movie the real impact that the lobbyists and the campaign contributions are having to carry the water of this industry. They're the largest lobbyists and the largest contributors of campaign dollars to politicians, and they seem to have a lock on both parties, not just the Republicans. Okay, so let's look at some of the issues that people raise, and we'll do this very quickly. The toxic spin of the industry. Government is not competent to handle such a huge undertaking, and we see this in articles. Well, the government is not really going to run the healthcare system under a single payer system. This is not socialized medicine. The government will do what it does best. It taxes efficiently. It can negotiate prices. It pays bills when presented. And Medicare, let's consider Medicare much like an escrow agent for real estate. Toxic spin. Number 2, single payer is too expensive. Not true. Countries that have, the proof is in the pudding here. Countries that have adopted a single payer healthcare system spend less per capita and certainly produce better public health care results. We're ranked, I think, about 37th in the WHO healthcare outcome statistics. Okay, on average, many studies show a savings, and I think maybe 10%, we may be overstating here, but somewhere between 5 to 10% through a single-payer universal system. We've just seen a most recent study coming out of even Jerry's organization up at the University of Massachusetts on the proposed plan for California, and that approaches the 5 to 10% savings even after universal care is given. Okay, everyone's covered. Single payer, eliminating the administrative complexity through and with central negotiation with power is the only way to curb runaway costs in healthcare. So I've completed my presentation, and I'm really pleased to present Jerry Friedman, who's not only an eminent economist, really one of the foremost economists on healthcare. He's done many state studies on healthcare system reform, and very highly regarded in our reform movement. A professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts, Harvard-trained PhD in economics with too many credentials for me to mention. And he's also a wonderful guy, very funny at times, and a joy to work with. Jerry?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard. And thank you all for having me. Can I get my slides up? And there we go. Okay, what is next? And moving on to the substance, in brief, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's wrong with competitive markets, why markets don't work in health insurance. Second, why U.S. healthcare is so expensive, even though so many Americans are locked out of the healthcare system by our finance methods. And finally, briefly about, let no crisis go wasted, and how single payer is the answer. Okay, moving to the next slide, which comes out of, my father was a businessman. He built up the biggest coffee business in the New York City area. One of my brothers runs it. And I appreciate how market competition can make for a more efficient economy and a growing economy. So I spent a lot of time wondering, why is it that private health insurance doesn't lead to efficiency? And I realized that the answer is in the distribution of the costs of being sick. Most of the time, most people are healthy. Even most people on Medicare are healthy. Something like 15% of people on Medicare did not file a claim last year. Most of your costs are associated with a few people. So if you are a for-profit health insurer, your route to profitability and to greater profits is not by increasing productivity. It's not by making a better product. My father did well by getting better coffee, delivering it to offices more efficiently, having better brewing technology. All that stuff was good for the world and also good for his bottom line. A health insurer is different. The way you make money as a health insurer is by finding the people who are going to get sick and getting them to go away. They call that, the technical term for that is lemon dropping. The flip side of that is find the people who are going to be healthy and attract them to your policies. They call that cherry picking. You want to make be a successful shoe company, make better shoes. You want to be a successful health insurer, be a worse insurer. Provide worse insurance for the sick while giving something extra to the healthy. Maybe a health club membership, maybe free bicycles. After all, sick people aren't going to be riding bicycles, but healthy people might. Health insurers, private insurers who practice what economists call adverse selection, selecting the sick people, will prosper. Those who pay bills on time, give you access to the doctors you need to see, they will attract sick people. That will force them to raise their rates with higher coverage costs, higher premiums. Healthy people will opt out. They will go to a different insurer. And then you will have a pool of people who are even sicker. And you'll have to raise your rates, and then the healthy people drop out. And they call this the health insurance death spiral. Everybody knows about this. Insurers talk about it. So what do you do to avoid the health insurance death spiral? You make life difficult for the sick. You make it difficult for people to file claims. You establish an inefficient bureaucratic bloat that, rejects claims arbitrarily, hassles doctors, make it difficult and expensive to file claims so that people will go away. Okay, move on to the next slide. There are other problems with the health insurance system with private health insurance for healthcare, in addition to the adverse selection problem. The adverse selection problem is the biggest, but there are others as well. Many health insurers are too small to achieve efficiency in claim processing, especially since even Massachusetts, we have 8 health insurers in the state, but each of them offers literally dozens of separate plans, each plan with different claim processing technology, different offices. It's all too small, inefficient. Medicare is much more efficient because it's dealing with vast numbers of people, vast numbers of claims, so you can automate very well. Second, health insurers profit by restricting information. You restrict access to your information, your membership, your benefits, etc. You restrict access, then you can sell that information to people. You can sell it to drug companies so they can advertise to people who are filing claims for particular conditions. But that means the general public doesn't have access to this information. If you look at the literature, the epidemiological literature for the United States, it is overwhelmingly dominated by studies of the Medicare population, because we know when they're sick, because it's public information. I mean, not public in that, you can't call them up, the Medicare, and get that. But as a researcher, you can get it. So you can learn about what technologies work, what works and what doesn't work. You can even find which doctors are more expensive, but only for treating Medicare people. This limits our ability to improve medical treatments in the United States. And it also limits our ability to identify the very small number of doctors who are really bad. Private health insurers profit by restricting access to care. You're a private insurer. You're dealing with the problem of, rates are too high for doctors. So you establish a network and you offer access to that network to your people. But that only works if you restrict people's ability to go outside the network. And you do this every year. You renegotiate. So if you have a doctor that you've been seeing for a long time and suddenly that doctor's in your network, which we know one of the determinants of good health and inexpensive care is continuity of care. That is necessarily disrupted by private health insurance. Finally, and this gets back to what Richard was talking about with both hospitals and the drug companies. Private health insurers are too small to drive down monopoly rents. Monopoly rents have become an outrageous problem in the health insurance, in the healthcare system. I'm working right now with data for every hospital in Ohio. The range in rates for the same conditions is as much as 4 to 5 to 1. Some hospitals are much, much more expensive. Now, to some degree, these are teaching hospitals in urban areas that are more expensive, but a lot of it is just profit. They're making rents off of everybody else because they can get away with it. The problem is that people are very responsive to brand names in healthcare, but not responsive to price, especially because so many people have health insurance. And the health insurers themselves can't address these high prices. An example was a few years ago, Tufts Health Plan, which is run by the grandson, or the CEO's grandson of President Franklin Roosevelt. He decided to do the right thing and stand up to the Harvard hospitals, which are a network called Partners, charging outrageous prices, 4 or 5 times what everybody else charges. And he said, no, we're not going to pay that. Well, what happened was the Partners network told him to take a walk, a long walk off a short pier. He did for 48 hours, and then Tufts surrendered. Tufts Health Plan surrendered. They accepted the Harvard rates because so many of their subscribers were going to walk out. Small health insurers can't address monopoly pricing. They can't address monopoly pricing of drugs. They can't address monopoly pricing of hospitals. So it just encourages more waste in the system. Okay, moving to the next slide, we see the result, which is, there we go. On the vertical axis is life expectancy. On the horizontal, that's both genders' life expectancy. It doesn't matter if you do women or men separately. On the horizontal axis is the log of healthcare spending. So every half step, going from 7 to 7.5, that's a 50% increase. Going from 7.5 to 8, a 50% increase. As you see, leaving out the United States for a second, there's almost a straight linear relationship, statistically significant, at high confidence levels, all that stuff, between spending and life expectancy. You spend more money, you get people who live longer. It goes the other way also. You live longer, you're going to be spending more money. The United States, though, is different. We spend way more money. We spend almost 50% more than anybody else. This is per person, healthcare spending per person. But we don't get the life expectancy. In fact, if we had the life expectancy appropriate for our spending, we would be living about 6 years longer. If we had the spending appropriate for life expectancy, we'd be Chile, and we'd be spending $7,000 less per person. Yeah. Sometimes in class, I ask people whether they'd rather have the money or the years of life. I stopped doing that because young people all choose the money. I, on the other hand, would choose the years of life, but I just had my 62nd birthday. So, okay. So moving to the next slide. So we have a system. We have a system that is inefficient. And when did we become inefficient? As Richard pointed out, you could almost date it to 1971. 1971, actually, Richard Nixon, President of the United States, proposed a single-payer, catastrophic coverage, not general coverage. And after his reelection, Nixon and Ted Kennedy were going to work on something. It didn't happen because of Watergate. But at the same time, 1971, Canada adopted Medicare. They call it that just to make fun of us, I swear. Since 1971, Canada's per person spending has gone up by $3,785. Well, this is actually as of 2008. Their life expectancy gain was 6.6 years. So they got 1 year of life every $573 in spending. The United States, we got only 5.4 years of life expectancy, and we spent, and as of 2008, we were spending $7,000 more. So our spending was between 3 times, our years of life gained were between 3 times as much and twice as much what other countries had to spend to get an extra year of life. France had to spend only $400 to get an extra year of life. And mind you, all of these countries in 1971 had very similar life expectancies. It's not like France was catching up. Sweden was first at that time. I think they may still be first, but they've lost a little ground compared to France and Germany. But look at that last column. If we were as efficient as Canada in adding years of life, we would have $4,000 extra. That is the cost between the United States and Canada. That is the cost of our experiment in private health insurance over the last 45 years. I'm not saying we would be just as efficient as Canada if we had adopted the Medicare system in 1971. On the other hand, I'm not sure why we wouldn't be. I mean, you go from the United States to Canada, it's not like you're going to some really strange place, except they have a more efficient way of processing bills. That's really all that amounts to. Okay, moving to the next slide, because one of the arguments against universal coverage, Medicare for all, is that if we had universal coverage, can I do this? No. Okay. We need to move to the next slide. There we go. If we had universal coverage, people would just go to the doctor all the time. And oh my God, maybe we should go to the doctor more often. Compared to other countries in the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and actually that isn't the OECD average. I mislabeled that. It's the OECD average for the affluent members of the OECD. When I was in grad school, we called the OECD the Club of the Rich, but then they started letting other countries in. So you can't just use the data straight. Point is, we go to the doctor three times a year less than other countries. The Japanese, who have the longest life expectancy, they go 12 times a year. We go 4 times a year. So we're not getting too much health care. If anything, we're getting too little. And that is related to the adverse selection policies of the health insurers. And if you go to the next slide, you see where this works. Because we've been using free market competition. And what insurers do is they restrict access to health care for people in their insurance policy. If people are unhappy about that, they're likely to be people who are going to be sick a lot. So the insurance companies are happy to lose them. And people who are healthy don't even know. So a third of Americans under the age of 65 experienced some access barrier in the last year, including over 20% who could not fill a prescription. You go to the doctor tells you, hey, you really need to take this for your blood pressure, for your cholesterol, for whatever. And you walk out, you look at it and say, I can't afford this, and you toss the prescription. Or worse, you take part of it and you save some, which could make things even worse for everybody. And that is a result of a health insurance system. People can't afford to use their prescriptions. They can't afford to go for follow-up care. They can't afford to go to the specialist. And they hope that they'll be okay anyway. In other countries, this doesn't happen nearly as frequently. In Britain, only 4% of the public says they could not afford to go to the doctor or access care because of cost. The result, you go to the next slide, and you see every county in the United States in 2012. Technically, this is before the Affordable Care Act, so we hope things are a little better. A diamond represents every county, 3,000 some odd counties. The horizontal axis is the proportion in that county reporting they had access. It's a slightly different question than the one in the previous slide, which is why the numbers are somewhat different. The vertical, guess what? People can't afford to go to the doctor, die. You can estimate from these data, well, I did estimate, that over 200,000 excess deaths in the United States because people could not access the healthcare system because of cost. We all know the solution. Here you have the green line is the Center for Medicare Statistics, their 2015 estimates, projections of spending, total spending. That's not thousands of dollars on the vertical axis. That is billions of dollars. So they project, as Richard said, that in 2025, we're going to be spending something like $6 trillion on healthcare, out of an economy that is projected in 2026 to be something on the order of $24 trillion. So we'll be spending about 25% of our national income on healthcare. Right now, we're spending 18%. The blue line is my projection from last year of what would happen if we adopted, in November of 2016, a single-payer system, much like the numbers that Richard was talking about. There would be an immediate savings because we'd flush out that administrative waste. We'd get rid of all the waste associated with the private health insurance system. We would bargain down some of these monopoly profits, and we'd save money. And then some of that money would be spent on the 10% who are currently uninsured, and the 30% who are underinsured. Well, I guess 20% who are underinsured plus the 10% who are uninsured. Over time, notice the line flattens out. That is in line with the experience of every other country in the world and the experience of the United States Medicare system. The U.S. Medicare system has controlled cost increases more effectively than has the rest of the U.S. healthcare system. U.S. Medicare inflation within the Medicare system, the cost of providing the same bundle of care for people from year to year to year, that has grown 1.1% slower than the rate of growth in healthcare prices overall. Medicare has controlled some of these monopoly prices, and so those prices haven't risen as fast. If the whole U.S. medical system was like that, then the increase in cost would be along that blue line. And by 2026, we would be saving over $1 trillion. Now the next slide. Why haven't we done it? Well, every saving comes from somebody's income. One of the most common questions I get is, what about all the jobs? What about all these people who are going to lose their jobs? That is, we could address that with unemployment insurance. We could point out that the economy will expand because businesses will be able to compete better. But the big one is the people who own the health insurance companies. They are right now exploiting the rest of the American business community and the rest of the American population. And the drug companies, they are exploiting you and me. And they are getting rich off of us. Second, benefits of perspective. Economists will tell you people will always value a bird in hand a lot more than even two birds in the bush. Finally, the biggest beneficiaries are the poor. And they don't vote. Finally, you can go to the next slide, the last slide. Over time, we have created $3 trillion of private interest in inefficient and inequitable health care. Maybe not $3 trillion, you could take out some of the Medicare and Medicaid system, but health insurers, elite overpaid hospitals and providers, big pharma, medical equipment suppliers, and people with good and heavily subsidized private insurance. My private insurance as an employee of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts gets a big tax subsidy, a subsidy that people who don't have health insurance don't necessarily get, or people who have less expensive health insurance, or people who are in a lower tax bracket don't get as much. It may have been easier to do single payer back in 1935 or 1965 before we had built up this system, but this is the world we're in, and we still have to do it now. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Go ahead, Marvin.
This is Marvin here. Time for questions. So there are several ways that we can go about this. If you look on your prompter screen, you can see there's a button for raising your hand, and if you do that, I can populate that. Other than that, you can go to the questions box and type in something. Right now, we already have a couple questions that I can read off while folks get their bearings on where to type the questions in. The first that everyone's been asking is, yes, the slides will be on our website. So if you go to the aspccouncil.org/webinars, you'll be able to find the full recording of this webinar and review. The slides will also be there. Also on Business Leaders for Healthcare website, it will be on their website also. So the first question is, if the providers charge the low Medicare costs for all, what happens to their income or sustainability?
Okay, now first of all, on average, private health insurance pays about 15% more than Medicare. A lot of that 15%, on the average, a lot of the 15% is for the extra billing and insurance-related expenses of dealing with private health insurance, which is about 10-15% of costs. So most providers wouldn't notice much difference. They'd have less cash flow, but their net income would be about the same. There are others. I'm not a loyal son of my alma maters, Columbia and Harvard, because both of them operate among the most expensive hospitals in the country. And Medicare does pay Massachusetts General Hospital and Columbia Presbyterian and hospitals like that. They do pay them more because they have the expense of training people, and they get more expensive patients. They get patients with more problems. But they also have some really highly paid people and very expensive lunches, free lunches in the cafeteria. You go there. And yes, those people are going to lose, which is part of why some of the groups talking about single payer, campaigning for single payer, in my opinion, don't talk about the providers. They don't talk about how Mass General is going to lose money. When I tried to put that into a report, I was told to take it out. And similarly, my report for New York State, I was told we're not taking on the elite hospitals. But those hospitals are taking advantage of it. And a lot of smaller hospitals. It's not only the really elite hospitals, a lot of isolated hospitals, hospitals that have monopoly power. If you're from the Pittsburgh area, it's scandalous what's going on there. They're basically two hospital networks competing or not competing, and they just jack up prices just like any other monopoly. So yeah, some of these providers are going to lose out. They'll still be able to make a reasonable rate of return. Hospitals do not go bankrupt out of Medicare. Medicaid is a different story, and single payer plans that I've been involved with all include a rate increase for Medicaid. But Medicare rates are reasonable. Hospitals can make a good profit, and doctors can have a very nice living and still take very nice vacations. It's just some of them are not going to be able to take quite such.
Yeah, I could add, Jerry. Jerry, you know, they're with the Affordable Care Act, the amount of uncompensated care, charitable care, really declined significantly to, I think it's 2 to 3% of total care for many hospitals. And now with this new plan in which, you know, under consideration, the new planning being done, we're going to see an uptick, serious uptick in the level of uncompensated care, and that is going to result in cost shifting and making private insurance more expensive, because ultimately the hospitals will pass that on through their power over insurance companies. So you know, I think the other thing is that when we look at inner city hospitals, and we have some in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, they're independent of the large, mostly suburban hospitals. They're doing, you know, when we talk to their administrators, their CEOs, they're doing fine with Medicare reimbursement levels, and I think what we'll see is a leveling off and a sense of discipline, self-discipline on the part of hospitals when we implement single payer.
Okay, thank you. So to go along with that, we have a question here. What are some of the cons to a single payer system? Not the toxic spin, but the legitimate cons.
Well, I think the legitimate criticism of single payer is that a government agency, and it doesn't have to be a political body, but there'll be a central agency that will be deciding what is medically appropriate. Right now, you have a lot of insurance companies. Each insurance company decides what's medically appropriate. So, if you have an insurance that doesn't cover the acupuncture you want, you do have the possibility of finding a different insurance company that will cover acupuncture. And it would be very important in structuring this that people have access to a variety of care modalities, because there are different ways that people heal. When I talked about the benefits of the information that would be gathered by single payer, you have to be very careful in using this, because there are some doctors who will have more expensive patients, even when you factor in all these variables that you can put into this. You want to be very sensitive in dealing with whether a doctor is being more expensive or whether he or she is attracting more expensive people, or maybe just healing them in a way that works better for some types of people. So the danger of a single payer would be imposing uniformity on a system, on a world where people are very different. I think, this is a problem that we have in health insurance already. But, it's something we need to be careful about. That's what I see as the biggest. And then there's a short-run disruption, of course. I don't want to just dismiss it, but, about 2 million people would lose their jobs in billing and insurance-related activities. A lot of them would immediately get reemployed in the physician practices. Many of them would find better things to do with their lives because they were generally unpleasant jobs. But it's going to be disruptive for some people, and we need to provide for some retraining possibilities in place to help them.
Next question.
Okay. Okay, so, pardon me, I'm just reading it here long. Okay, how does Medicare for all get paid for after the transition?
Okay, it gets paid for through taxes, just like the current system. Keep in mind, the Supreme Court ruled that the premiums that we are required to pay for health insurance are a form of taxation. It's just a form of taxation that, first of all, it's a lump sum. Everybody pays the same amount. So this department secretary in economics over here, she earns, I don't know, something like 1/5 what I make. But her family plan costs the same amount as my family plan. It's just an inconvenience to me and a major burden to her. Any form of taxation we have through the government to finance Medicare for all, whether it's a consumption tax, whether it's an income tax, whether it's a so-called Tobin tax on financial transactions, which some people have talked about, whatever it is, it's going to be related to some extent to people's ability to pay. The current system is not. So that's the first thing. Exactly how are we going to finance it in terms of which taxes? I mean, I've put forward various different ideas, ranging from an enhanced payroll tax like what we have now for Medicare to, like I said, a Tobin tax. or a consumption tax. I mean, there are different ways to do it, but they all amount to some form of taxation. And second, keep in mind it will be less money than people are paying now. So your tax burden will fall. And over time, your tax burden will fall more and more. If we're spending $1 trillion less on healthcare in 10 years, that is $1 trillion less that people are paying premiums, taxes to the health insurance system, and taxes to the government for more expensive healthcare.
Okay.
I could add that there's we've seen California is considering a single-payer healthcare system, and one of the interesting models, financing models, is a 3.3% payroll tax for the employee based on total compensation to that employee, 3.3% to the employer, and I think it's 2.4% as a sales tax, and that would replace what is somewhere around 14-15% of total compensation that currently many medium-sized employers who offer health care are experiencing.
Yes, and
Seems to be reasonable, quite reasonable. Next question.
Yep. So, what is the economic impact on farmer under a single-payer system? How much income will they lose, and will we need to find another way to incentivize new drug development?
Okay, well, Pharma would lose about a third of their gross income. That's a lot. But the effect on incentives for drug development will be virtually minimal. Big Pharma is one of my least favorite industries. Virtually all the major drug innovations since penicillin have come out, or since sulfa drugs actually, have come out of public finance. And there's good reason for this. It's very hard to capture all the benefits of basic research. So basic research, whether it's on digital media, on the development of the internet, or the development of antibiotics, or statin drugs, basic research is financed by the government. The National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation. The scientists are trained and trained through the federal government finance, and the drugs are developed. And then they get picked up by drug companies who spend some money on marketing, packaging. Most of their R&D is on packaging and what do they call it? Greenlining their drugs, remodulating them slightly so they can extend the patent. So I don't think we'd lose anything at all. And for all the savings that we would have from single payer and the epidemiological information, we'd be able to do better research and get better drugs.
So we are at time, Jerry and Richard, and we do want to thank everyone for joining us today. Up on the screen now, we do have some of the resources that we talked about earlier, right? The blth.org is where you can, as a business leader, sign up and join the campaign. The link to the webinar will be there and on the ASBC General website, as Marvin talked about. We are looking to reach out to other business owners and business leaders to the extent that you could work with us to share this information with them, to push it out. That would be greatly appreciated. We really do believe that business leaders entering into this debate, making the business and economic case is a very important way forward, and that's what we are prepared to do with Business Leaders Transforming Healthcare. And then, of course, there are the movies, both Fix It, Healthcare at the Tipping Point, and Big Pharma Market Failure, that you can find also at fixithealthcare.com. And Eliza Kelston on the ASB staff is the key person helping to coordinate a lot of the work that we have out there. But then we'd also, in addition, for those of you in California and in Oregon, is to head over to our main page here on Business Leaders Transforming Healthcare, and you'll have the link back over to those campaigns and to support those efforts. So thank you, Richard and Jerry, and thank you all for joining us, and we look forward, hopefully, to working with you and building out the business and economic case for a truly inclusive and beneficial healthcare system to